I stood in the center of the crowded ballroom, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I held my sobbing 8-year-old daughter, Lily, her fresh blood staining my dress, while my own brother screamed at her that she was a trashy thief. Around us, my own parents nodded in cold approval, completely ignoring the heavy wooden wedding menu board my brother had just smashed directly against my little girl's head. They honestly thought they had finally broken me, that they could ruin my daughter's life just to save their own twisted pride. But as I looked down at the crimson on my fingers, my sorrow instantly turned to ice because they had absolutely no idea that the flashing red lights pulling into the venue parking lot were about to tear their entire world apart. Sharing a story this painful isn't easy, but knowing I'm not alone makes all the difference. Before we jump into the details, tell me, where in the world are you watching this from right now? Is it day or night where you are, and what time is it? Let me know your city and your local time in the comments. It honestly means the world to me to see how far our digital family reaches. Hello, my name is Harper, and up until June of 2026, I was the kind of woman who always stayed silent, swallowed her own tears, and picked up the broken pieces of whatever my family smashed. I am 32 years old. I work as a graphic designer in the beautiful historic city of Savannah, Georgia, and I built a quiet, peaceful life with my husband, Ryan. But above every single title I hold, the most important one to me is being a mother to my 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily is a sweet, gentle little girl who still looks at the world with absolute wonder, the kind of child who notices a butterfly on a windowsill or saves her allowance to buy treats for the shelter dogs. She was my entire world. And every single thing I did, every ounce of abuse I tolerated from my biological family over the years, I did it under the foolish delusion that keeping the peace would somehow protect her. Growing up in Savannah, you learn early on that family image is everything. Especially in the high society circles my parents desperately tried to claw their way into. I was always the quiet, reliable daughter. I was the one who got straight A's, never came home past curfew, cleaned the kitchen without being asked, and kept my head down. I thought that if I was just perfect enough, if I was just compliant enough, my parents would finally look at me with the same pride they had when they looked at my younger brother Austin. But innocence is a dangerous thing when you are surrounded by wolves wearing the faces of your mother and father. I blindly hoped that my constant kindness and selflessness would eventually earn me a seat at the table, that one day my mother would hug me and tell me she loved me the way she loved him. Ryan always saw right through them. From the moment we started dating in our early 20s, he would hold my hand after family dinners and whisper, "Harper, they don't deserve you. You are giving pieces of your soul to people who wouldn't even offer you a glass of water in a desert." But I couldn't let go of the fantasy of a loving family. When Ryan and I got married in a small, modest backyard ceremony that my parents didn't even bother to stay for the reception of, I promised myself I would do better. I promised I would work harder to be a good daughter, a good sister. I thought that if I kept proving my loyalty, things would change. I didn't realize that to people like my parents, Charles and Helen, and my brother Austin, my loyalty wasn't a virtue. It was just a resource to be mined until there was nothing left of me but dust. I brought my daughter into that toxic environment, believing that a grandfather's smile and a grandmother's kiss were genuine, completely blind to the fact that beneath the Southern charm and expensive linen suits, my family was a viper's nest, just waiting for the perfect moment to strike. To truly understand how we ended up in that blood-stained ballroom, you have to understand the lifetime of sacrifices I made for the golden child of our family. Austin was 2 years younger than me, but from the moment he was born, he was treated like royalty, while I was treated like his unpaid servant. He was the son who would carry on the family name, the boy who could do no wrong. My parents, Charles and Helen, didn't just favor him, they worshipped him. Every mistake he made was excused. Every whim was catered to, and every single bill he accumulated was pushed onto my shoulders. The real exploitation started when I turned 18. I had worked myself to the bone all through high school, maintaining a perfect GPA while working a part-time job at a local bakery. My dream was to attend a prestigious out-of-state university to study design. I got accepted, and I was ecstatic. But 2 weeks before move-in day, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table. My mother didn't look me in the eye. She just pushed a glass of iced tea toward me and said, "Harper, you need to be realistic. Austin wants to go to a private business academy in Atlanta, and we simply cannot afford both. You're a girl. You can just go to the local community college here in Savannah. You need to step aside for your brother. He's going to do big things for this family." I cried for 3 days straight, but I did it. I gave up my dream university, stayed in Savannah, and watched my parents proudly post pictures of Austin's high-end dorm room while I commuted to night classes. But giving up my education wasn't enough. As soon as I started building my graphic design career and saving my own money, my parents turned me into Austin's personal ATM. Austin lived a life of complete luxury he hadn't earned, driving sports cars and wearing designer clothes. Whenever he maxed out his credit cards or faced a lawsuit from a failed business venture, my father would call me using the exact same emotional blackmail. "He's your brother, Harper. He's in a tight spot. Family stands together." Over 5 years, they drained exactly $2,400 of my hard-earned savings. They never paid back a single dime. If I ever asked about it, my mother would coldly scoff and say I was being selfish. Austin grew into a deeply narcissistic, arrogant man who genuinely believed the world owed him everything. And then he met Amber. Amber came from an incredibly wealthy, old money family in Savannah, and she was just as snobbish and manipulative as Austin. Together, they were unbearable. When they got engaged, my parents immediately offered to fund a massive, lavish $8,000 wedding at a historic estate using money they had squeezed out of me and loans they expected me to help cover. Ryan begged me not to go. He said, "Harper, they treat you like dirt. Look at the invitation. They didn't even put your name on the family list." But I looked at my sweet little Lily, who was so excited to see her uncle get married in her pretty white flower dress, and I told Ryan we had to support them. I truly thought that if I smiled, stayed out of the way, and played the supportive sister, we could get through the night peacefully. I had no idea that Austin and Amber didn't just want me there as a guest. They wanted me there to be their foot tool, and they were already planning a trap to publicly humiliate me. The wedding reception at the historic Savannah estate was sensory overload. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceilings, jazz music filled the air, and over 200 high society guests in black tie attire sipped champagne. Ryan and I sat at the very back table right next to the kitchen doors, a blatant insult from my mother, but I kept a smile on my face for Lily's sake. She looked so proud in her little white dress, swinging her legs and eating her vanilla ice cream. About an hour into the reception, Ryan's phone buzzed. It was an urgent make-orb-break-ac conference call regarding a major corporate account his logistics firm had been chasing for 6 months. He looked at me apologetically. I patted his hand and whispered, "Go ahead, babe. It's too loud in here anyway. Walk out to the courtyard where it's quiet. Lily and I will be perfectly fine." He kissed my forehead, grabbed his jacket, and slipped out the side doors toward the parking lot. Not even 10 minutes after Ryan left, the music abruptly stopped. The cheerful chatter in the ballroom died down, replaced by a tense, heavy silence. I looked up and saw my brother Austin standing near the grand head table, his face twisted in a mask of theatrical panic. He began shouting, "My phone is gone. Someone just stole my phone." Amber, his bride, let out a dramatic gasp, clutching her pearls. Austin stormed over to the microphone, his voice echoing through the expensive speakers. "Listen up, everyone. My brand new iPhone 17 Pro Max is missing. It was sitting right here on the bridal table. That phone has my encrypted banking apps, our digital wedding wallet with the vendor payout receipts, our honeymoon flight barcodes, and all my corporate client data. Whoever took it needs to bring it forward right now. People started whispering, looking around at each other in shock. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, but I assumed some drunk guest had accidentally picked it up. I leaned down to wipe a drop of ice cream off Lily's chin. Suddenly, the heavy sound of leather shoes stopped right behind my chair. I turned around. Austin was standing there, his eyes glaring down at me with a terrifying, malicious smirk.
My parents, Charles and Helen, were right behind him, along with Amber and her wealthy parents. "Austin, what's wrong?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "What's wrong is that your little brat was lurking around the bridal table right before my phone vanished." Austin snarled, his voice loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "What are you talking about?" I stood up, instinctively, placing my hands on Lily's shoulders. Lily has been sitting right next to me the entire evening. She hasn't left this table. "Don't lie for her, Harper." My mother, Helen, hissed, stepping forward. "We all know how you've raised her. Austin saw her sneaking around the gifts." "I didn't take it, Mommy. I swear." Lily whimpered, her big blue eyes filling with tears as she clutched my skirt. Before I could even process the accusation, Austin lunged forward. He didn't just ask to check. He violently snatched Lily's small denim jacket, which was hanging on the back of her chair. He shoved his hand into the deep right pocket, and with a triumphant roar, he pulled out a sleek titanium-colored iPhone 17 Pro Max. The entire ballroom gasped. Amber's mother loudly sighed. "Oh, absolutely disgusting. A thief in the family." Amber looked at me with pure disgust and yelled, "Your trashy kid just tried to ruin my wedding day. Look at her. She's a criminal." I stared at the phone in utter disbelief. My mind was racing. Lily's pockets were tiny, and she had been under my nose the whole night. She didn't even know how to bypass a lock screen. Then I caught Austin's eye. For a split second, the anger vanished from his face, replaced by a cold, arrogant, mocking grin. That's when the horrific realization hit me like a physical blow. Lily didn't steal anything. Austin had intentionally planted his own phone in my 8-year-old daughter's jacket just to publicly humiliate us and permanently label my child a thief in front of his new high society in-laws. I opened my mouth to scream the truth to call out his pathetic setup, but I never got the chance. When I stepped between Austin and my crying daughter, he completely lost his mind. The theatrical panic on his face melted into pure, uncontrolled, narcissistic rage. He looked around at Amber's wealthy family, realizing he needed to put on a grand show of being the ultimate protector of their honor. "Your thief of a daughter just tried to ruin my wedding," Austin roared, his face turning an angry purple. Right next to our table at the grand entrance of the ballroom stood a massive, heavy display. It was a rustic wedding menu board crafted from solid, thick oak with a heavy row iron frame used to display the night's catering options to the high society guests. In one swift, violent motion, Austin lunged backward, grabbed the heavy oak frame of the menu board, and swung it with all his might. He wasn't aiming at me. He swung it directly at my 8-year-old girl. The heavy wood struck Lily right across the side of her head. The sickening, dull thud echoed through the sudden silence of the ballroom. Lily didn't even have time to scream. The force of the blow lifted her small frame slightly off her feet before she collapsed hard onto the cold marble floor. I shrieked, a sound tearing from my throat that didn't even sound human. I dropped to my knees slamming violently against the marble, and scooped my little girl into my arms. She was hyperventilating, her eyes rolling back as a thick crimson stream of blood began to seep rapidly through her blonde hair, staining the front of her white flower dress and pooling onto my own hands. She was trembling, gasping for air,
clutching my wrists with her tiny, weak fingers. I looked up at the circle of people standing around us, tears blinding my vision. I looked directly at my mother, Helen, and my father, Charles. "Help me," I sobbed, my voice cracking. "Call an ambulance. He's killed her. Call for help."
But as I looked into my mother's eyes, expecting to see a grandmother's horror, I saw nothing but absolute freezing coldness. Helen didn't move an inch. She didn't look at the blood pooling on the floor. Instead, she stepped closer to Austin, patting his arm, and looked down at me with an expression of pure disgust. "Austin has a right to be angry, Harper," my mother said, her voice smooth, level, and entirely devoid of human emotion. "You brought a thief into this venue. You brought this embarrassment upon this family. He was just defending his property. You brought this entirely on yourself." My father, Charles, nodded in strict agreement, crossing his arms over his expensive tuxedo. "Take your girl and get out, Harper. You've ruined your brother's night enough." Austin did what any man would do. Amber's family stood right beside them, nodding, murmuring that the trash needed to be removed so they could continue the cake cutting. In that exact second, as my daughter's warm blood soaked through the fabric of my dress, and my own biological parents defended the grown man who had just assaulted a child, something inside me broke permanently. The naive, forgiving, submissive girl who had spent 32 years begging for their love died right there on that marble floor. The overwhelming panic vanished. My tears instantly stopped flowing, drying up into a cold, hard crust. A terrifying, unnatural stillness washed over my mind, and my entire soul turned into absolute ice. I looked at my brother's arrogant face, then at my parents' cold stares, and I realized that being kind was a sin. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was going to systematically destroy every single person standing in this circle. The side doors of the ballroom slammed open, and my husband Ryan came rushing inside. He had just finished his conference call, but the moment his eyes landed on me on the floor holding our bleeding, hyperventilating daughter, his face went completely pale. He didn't ask questions. He didn't look at my parents. He dropped to his knees, his hands trembling as he checked Lily's pulse, his eyes turning into pure lethal fire. While Ryan immediately pulled out his phone and dialed 911, screaming for emergency services, I stood up. I wiped Lily's blood onto my skirt, stood at my full height, and took total calculated control of the room. Within 10 minutes, the heavy double doors of the historic estate burst open again. 2 paramedics rushed into the grand ballroom, pushing a wheeled stretcher through the crowd of silent, staring guests. Austin tried to step in front of them, smoothing down his tuxedo jacket, frantically whispering, "Hey guys, it's just a minor family dispute." The kid stumbled. "We don't need a scene here." I marched right past him and grabbed the lead paramedic's arm. My brother struck my 8-year-old daughter in the head with a solid oak menu board, I said, my voice so loud, flat, and chillingly calm that the entire room went dead silent. "I want every single scratch, every bruise, and every drop of blood meticulously documented on your official emergency medical report. She is bleeding from the cranium. We need an immediate transport via ambulance to the trauma center, and I want the legal paper trail started right now." The paramedics looked at the blood, looked at Austin, and immediately went to work, lifting my sobbing little girl onto the stretcher. Ryan climbed into the back of the ambulance with her, holding her hand while I stayed behind to finish the job. As the ambulance sped away with its sirens wailing, 2 Savannah police officers entered the venue. My father, Charles, immediately stepped forward using his wealthy businessman voice. "Officers, I'm Charles. This is my son's wedding. It was a misunderstanding over a stolen phone, a minor domestic issue. We have it under control." I walked straight up to the officers, blocking my father. "I am the mother of the victim," I told them, staring directly into the officer's body camera. "My brother, Austin, just committed felony child abuse and assault with a deadly weapon. I am pressing full charges, and I demand an immediate investigation." Austin laughed nervously, pointing at Lily's denim jacket on the chair. "She stole my iPhone 17 Pro Max. I found it in her pocket. I have witnesses." My mother and Amber's parents loudly chimed in, lying through their teeth to the police, claiming Lily was a known thief. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I simply turned to the officers and the venue manager, who was standing nearby, paralyzed with fear. "This historic estate has high-defin CCTV security cameras overlooking every single inch of this ballroom," I said, pointing up at the lens directly above our table. "Manager, take us to your office right now. Officers, I want you to view the live recording of the last 30 minutes, and I want it played on the main projector screen in this ballroom so every single guest can see exactly what kind of monster they are celebrating tonight." The manager, terrified of a lawsuit, didn't hesitate. He led us and the police straight to the security room, while the wedding guests crowded around the open doors, whispering in absolute suspense. The venue manager's fingers clicked rapidly across the keyboard, pulling up the high-defin security feed from camera 4. With the police officers standing over his shoulder, he patched the video feed directly into the ballroom's massive overhead projector screen. The entire wedding guest list watched in breathless silence as the footage rewound, then played in crystal-clear quality. There on the big screen was my brother Austin. The video showed him walking up to our vacant table while I was looking away, pulling his sleek titanium iPhone 17 Pro Max from his own pocket, looking around nervously, and then slipping it deep into Lily's tiny denim jacket pocket. The silence that followed was suffocating.
Then the ballroom erupted. Amber, the bride, turned around and looked at Austin with utter horror. Before he could utter a single word, she swung her hand and slapped him across the face so hard the sound echoed off the high ceilings. "You sick, pathetic psycho!" she screamed, tears ruining her expensive bridal makeup. "You framed an 8-year-old child and cracked her head open just to play a big man. You are a monster." She tore her diamond engagement ring off her finger, threw it violently at his chest, and turned to her parents. Within 2 minutes, Amber and her entire wealthy family marched out of the venue, permanently canceling the wedding and leaving the $8,000 event in absolute ruins. The 2 Savannah police officers didn't waste another second. They walked straight up to Austin, grabbed his arms, and forced them behind his back. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs locking over the sleeves of his expensive wedding tuxedo was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard in my life. They arrested him right there on the spot for felony child abuse, aggravated assault, and filing a false police report. When my parents, Charles and Helen, realized their golden boy was actually going to jail, they completely lost their dignity. My mother fell to her knees, clutching at my bloody dress, weeping and begging me to drop the charges. "Harper, please. It will ruin his life. He'll lose his job. Think of the family name." My father stood there trembling, his high society pride completely shattered as the remaining guests looked at them with pure disgust. I looked down at my mother, pulled my dress out of her hands, and looked her dead in the eye. "You told me he did what any man would do," I whispered, my voice cutting through her sobs like a razor blade. "So now he can go do it in a state penitentiary." The police warned my parents that if they continued to lie, they would be arrested as accessories to a crime, leaving them publicly ruined and utterly isolated. Austin was led out of his own wedding venue in chains, facing years in prison and a permanent criminal record. Today, Lily's physical wounds have fully healed, and she is back to being the happy, smiling, beautiful 8-year-old girl she deserves to be. Ryan and I completely cut off my toxic parents and brother, blocking them on everything and changing our numbers. We now live in absolute beautiful peace in our home, finally free from their darkness forever. Looking back at that night, I realized that sometimes cutting off your own flesh and blood isn't a choice. It's survival.
I spent 32 years trying to buy the love of people who were willing to sacrifice my innocent daughter just to protect their own toxic pride. But karma works in beautiful ways, and seeing Austin led away in handcuffs from his own ruined wedding taught me that justice always finds its way to the wicked. I chose my daughter. I chose my peace, and I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. But I want to hear from you. Do you think I did the right thing by putting my own brother behind bars? Let me know in the comments below. And if you learned something valuable from my journey, please subscribe and hit the bell icon.